This video is on qualitative financial metrics. Now, I've been talking about performance metrics in a couple of videos here, and I've been focusing mainly on quantitative metrics. In the last video, we talked about Jensen's alpha. Now, that's a quantitative metric. That spits out hard data that you can evaluate your performance by. But I wanted to make a video specifically on qualitative metrics. So you have your quantitative metrics, and then you also have your qualitative metrics. And qualitative metrics are very useful in putting context onto a situation. So we as finance people, it's very easy for us to get caught up in the data, right? To get caught up in the numbers, just focused on these numbers. And the danger in doing that is you lose sight of the big picture of what's going on. And qualitative metrics are very good at looking at the big picture and interpreting that data. So what do I mean when I say qualitative metrics? In a very simple sense, what I mean is writing down your assumptions. When you're making financial decisions, if you can document and write down your assumptions and do it in a consistent and structured way, what you get is that over time, you're able to look back at your financial decisions and see how good you were, and see if there's ways where you can improve. So I think it's helpful here to look at the overall financial decision-making process. And I talked about this a couple of videos ago. There's this process, and there's 4 steps that you go through. You evaluate the future, you identify your assumptions, you make a decision, and then you wait for the outcome. And every single financial decision you make goes through this process. It's the same process, and the goal here, as finance people, what you're trying to do is get better and better at this process. And performance metrics are meant to give you feedback on how well you're doing. So the good thing is that our brains are already wired for this process. Our brains are wired to predict the future, and we're actually pretty good at it. So I'm going to give you an example that's a non-finance example to show you how this works. But let's say you're walking outside. You're walking outside and you come to a small puddle in your path. Now at this point, you're going to predict the future. You're going to be able to think of what would happen if you were to try to jump over this small puddle. And you could predict out into the future that you would likely make it safely to the other side. So that's your assumption. And then what you're going to do is you're going to make the decision to jump. And so you jump over the puddle and you make it safely to the other side. This is you predicting the future and making decisions. And we're doing it constantly. And the same thing would happen if you were to walk outside and come across a massive puddle. If you came across a massive puddle, you would likely choose to walk around the puddle rather than try to jump across, because you know if you tried to jump across, you wouldn't make it and you'd get all muddy, and so we choose to walk around. So when we're making financial decisions, we're going through this same process. If you were trying to decide on an investment, you would look at the world around you. You'd look at the stock market, you'd look at the economy, you'd look at the competition, and you would choose whether or not to jump into this investment. So the goal here is to get better at this financial decision-making process. So let's look at the process one more time, because I want to emphasize how important this is. What we see here is assumptions are the key to this process. So you are making a decision based on your assumptions. So that's what we're tracking here in these qualitative metrics. I want you to write down your assumptions, because the better you can get at making assumptions, the better your decisions will be and the better your financial outcomes will be. And that's the goal. So to put this in an overall context, you have your quantitative metrics, and you have a whole series of these metrics. And then you also have your qualitative metrics. And the goal is to use these metrics together to give you an overall sense of your financial performance. And the real goal here is to get feedback. What you want is to get feedback on how you're doing so you can identify areas to get better, and so that overall, over time, you'll continually get better and better at making financial decisions.